Never go to the farm, Catherine. Promise me. Those were the last words my husband whispered with real intensity before his heart gave out at 54, leaving me a widow with a daughter who blamed me for everything and a hollow ache where my certainty used to live. 24 years of marriage, and I thought I knew every corner of Joshua Mitchell's soul. I was wrong. So wrong that when his attorney slid that antique brass key across his mahogany desk 2 weeks after the funeral, along with a sealed envelope bearing my name in Joshua's precise handwriting, I actually laughed. The sound came out bitter and strange in that wood-paneled office where death gets reduced to paperwork and signatures.
I know you both were involved.
What is this, I asked, turning the heavy key over in my palm, feeling its weight like an accusation. Your husband purchased a property in Alberta, Canada 3 years ago, Mr. Winters said, adjusting his glasses in that way lawyers do when they're about to detonate your entire world. According to his instructions, you were only to be informed of its existence after his passing. The deed has been transferred to your name. All taxes are paid for the next 5 years. A property in Canada, the farm, the place he'd forbidden me to visit for our entire marriage. The place that made his gentle face turn to stone whenever I'd asked about his childhood. My hands started shaking as I opened the envelope, and what I read there made me realize that the man I'd slept beside for 2 decades had been a complete stranger. My dearest Catherine. The letter began. If you're reading this, then I've left you too soon, and there's so much I should have told you, but couldn't bring myself to face. The farm is yours now. I've spent the last 3 years transforming it from the broken place of my childhood into something beautiful, something worthy of you. I know I made you promise never to go there. I'm releasing you from that promise. In fact, I'm asking you to go just once before you decide what to do with it. What you find there will explain everything I couldn't say while I was alive. I love you, Kat, more than you'll ever know. Joshua, I need to see this place. I told Mr. Winters, my voice sounding far away even to my own ears. There's one more thing you should know, he said, lowering his voice like he was sharing a secret that could get us both killed. The property has become quite valuable recently. Significant oil deposits were discovered in the region about 18 months ago. Your husband declined multiple offers from energy companies, and his family in Canada has contested the will. His brothers claim he wasn't mentally competent when he repurchased the family property. Brothers. Joshua had brothers, another secret in a growing pile of them. That's ridiculous, I said, anger finally cutting through my shock. Joshua was the most rational person I've ever known. Nevertheless, they've filed legal objections. Given the property's newfound value, this could get very complicated, Mrs. Mitchell. 48 hours later, I stood before imposing wooden gates marked Maple Creek Farm in wrought iron, my rental car idling behind me as I stared at what lay beyond. This wasn't some run-down family homestead. This was an estate. Rolling hills stretched into the distance, stands of maple trees, turning gold with autumn, a large farmhouse with fresh paint gleaming in the afternoon sun, and several outbuildings that looked like they belonged in a magazine spread about luxury country living. The key turned smoothly in the gate's lock. As I drove up the winding gravel driveway, my heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat. What secrets had Joshua kept here? What part of himself had he hidden from me for all these years while I taught high school English in Minnesota, blissfully ignorant that my husband was living a double life? The farmhouse was stunning. 2 stories with a wide porch and large windows that caught the light like eyes watching my approach. Nothing about it suggested the pain Joshua had always associated with his childhood home. This place had been loved, restored, reimagined with a care that spoke of obsession. My hands shook as I inserted the key into the front door. The lock clicked, the door swung open, and I stepped across the threshold into my husband's secret world. What I saw inside made my knees buckle. I grabbed the doorframe to keep from falling as tears blurred my vision, and a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob escaped my throat. Horses. Everywhere I looked, exquisite paintings of horses in full gallop across endless fields. Detailed sculptures capturing their power and grace. Photographs of magnificent breeds framed in simple black frames that lined every wall. My lifelong passion, the one indulgence Joshua had always supported but never quite understood, surrounded me in a gallery dedicated to my greatest love. And there, on a desk by the window, overlooking endless pastures, sat a silver laptop with a single red rose laid across its closed lid. Before I could take another step, the crunch of tires on gravel announced another arrival. Through the front window, I watched a black SUV pull up behind my rental car. 3 men emerged, all bearing the unmistakable Mitchell features that Joshua had carried. Tall frames, dark hair, strong jawlines. The Mitchell brothers had arrived, and from their grim expressions and the way they moved toward the house like wolves circling prey, they hadn't come to welcome the widow to Canada. The men approached with the confident stride of people who believed they belonged there. I quickly closed and locked the front door, my heart racing as instinct screamed at me to be cautious. Through the side window, I watched them pause on the porch, conferring among themselves before the oldest one, a silver-haired version of Joshua with harder eyes and a mouth set in a line of entitlement rapped sharply on the door. "Mrs. Mitchell, we know you're in there." He called out, his voice carrying that same Canadian accent that had softened Joshua's speech when he was tired or upset. "We need to talk." I remained silent, backing away from the door toward that laptop on the desk. Joshua's warning about his family had always been vague, but emphatic. Now faced with their unexpected arrival, every nerve in my body told me to trust my husband's judgment, even from beyond the grave. The knocking came again, more insistent. "Catherine, I'm Robert Mitchell, Joshua's older brother. These are our brothers, Alan and David. We're here about the farm. We have a right to be here." Of course they were here about the farm, not about Joshua, not to meet the wife their brother had loved for 24 years. They were here about the suddenly valuable property, and I'd bet my last dollar they had no intention of letting some American widow stand between them and what they believed was rightfully theirs. Ignoring the increasingly aggressive knocking that was starting to sound like demands, I moved to the desk and opened the laptop. The password prompt appeared, and I entered what Joshua had told me to use in his letter. The screen came to life, immediately opening to a folder labeled, "For Catherine." Inside were hundreds of video files, each named with a date starting from 2 weeks ago, the day after his funeral, and extending a full year into the future. My breath caught in my throat as I realized what I was looking at. Joshua had recorded messages for every single day of my first year without him. 1 year of keeping me company while I grieved. 1 year of explaining everything he should have told me while he was alive. With trembling fingers, I clicked the first one. Joshua's face filled the screen. Not the thin, pale version from his final months when the life had been draining out of him, and I had been too blind to see it, but healthy, vibrant, clearly recorded some time ago. He smiled directly into the camera, that crooked grin that had always made my heart skip. "Hello, Kat," he began, and I had to press my hand over my mouth to keep from crying out. "If you're watching this, then I'm gone, and you've come to the farm despite my years of making you promise not to." He chuckled softly, and the sound of his voice after weeks of silence felt like a knife and a caress all at once. "I should have known you wouldn't be able to resist, especially after Winters told you about it." The knocking outside had stopped. Through the window, I could see the men returning to their vehicle, retrieving documents, conferring with stern expressions and gestures that suggested they were calling in reinforcements. "I've made a video for every day of your first year without me." Joshua continued, his voice steady and sure in a way that made my chest ache. 1 year of me keeping you company while you grieve. 1 year of explaining everything I should have told you while I was alive." He looked down briefly, then back at the camera with an intensity that felt like he could see right through time to where I sat watching him. Starting with why I bought back the farm I swore I'd never set foot on again. "Tell me," I whispered to the screen, needing answers more than I'd ever needed anything in my life. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, Joshua said, and the world tilted sideways. A heart condition I inherited from my father. The doctors gave me 2 to 5 years. I chose not to tell you or Jenna. I didn't want pity, and I didn't want our final years overshadowed by death. His eyes softened with something that looked like an apology. "I wanted to live fully with you until the end, not slowly die in front of you." Shock and rage surged through me in equal measure. He'd hidden his diagnosis, made medical decisions without me, denied me the chance to prepare to cherish our final moments with full awareness, stolen my right to say goodbye properly. "I know you're angry right now," Joshua said, as if he could read my thoughts across the barrier of death. "You have every right to be. But I hope you'll understand that I made this choice out of love, not deception. I wanted to give you something more than watching me decline. I wanted to give you a future." The men outside were making phone calls now, pacing the gravel drive with the frustrated energy of thwarted entitlement. I forced myself to focus on the screen on Joshua's face, on whatever truth he was finally ready to reveal. "When I got my diagnosis, I decided to use whatever time I had left to create something meaningful for you," he said, leaning forward with that earnest expression he got when he was explaining something important. "You always loved horses, always talked about having land someday where you could raise them, live simply, paint again like you did in college before you gave it all up for us. So I found the last place anyone would expect me to go, the farm I'd fled at 18, vowing never to return." His expression hardened in a way I'd rarely seen. "What my brothers don't know is that I legally bought the farm from our father before he died. The old man was broke after years of failed schemes drinking away the family money. He sold it to me for a fraction of its worth, desperate for cash, swearing me to secrecy from my brothers, who still thought they'd inherit it someday." So this explained the legal challenge. His brothers believed they had rights to property that Joshua had legitimately purchased years ago. "The farm was in ruins when I bought it," Cat Joshua continued. "Just like when I was a kid. Broken fences, collapsed barns, a house full of ghosts and bad memories. But this time, I had the resources to transform it. Every business trip over the last 3 years wasn't really about work. I was here overseeing renovations, building something for you." Outside, the brothers had approached the door again. This time, Robert held a document against the window for me to see, some kind of court order with official seals and legal language meant to intimidate. "My brothers will come for it," Joshua said in the video, his expression turning grim. "They never wanted the farm until last year when oil was discovered in the region. Suddenly, the worthless property they'd mocked me for buying became valuable. They'll try everything to take it from you, Kat. They'll lie, manipulate, threaten. They might even try to turn Jenna against you." One of the brothers was on his phone again, his expression triumphant as he ended the call. I felt a chill run down my spine. "In the bottom drawer of this desk is a blue folder with every legal document you need," Joshua instructed. "The farm is unquestionably yours. I made sure of it. There's no legal loophole they can exploit, though they'll certainly try to find one." A vehicle was coming up the driveway now, a police cruiser with Royal Canadian Mounted Police markings. The brothers watched its approach with satisfied expressions that made my stomach twist with anxiety. "One last thing," Joshua said, his face softening again into that expression of pure love that had always undone me. "In the stables you'll find 6 horses, all breeds you've admired over the years. The staff I've hired will continue caring for them whether you're here or not. They're my last gift to you, along with the means to enjoy them." The video ended freezing on Joshua's smiling face as the knocking resumed at the door, more authoritative this time. "Mrs. Mitchell, RCMP, we need you to open the door, please." With a deep breath, I closed the laptop and retrieved the blue folder from the drawer where Joshua had promised it would be. Inside were legal documents, property deeds, purchase agreements, notarized statements, bank records. The farm was mine, completely and legally mine. I went to face whatever came next, armed with Joshua's foresight and a determination I hadn't known I possessed. As I reached for the door handle, my phone rang. Jenna, our daughter, calling from Minnesota. I hesitated, then answered. "Jenna, now's not a good time." "Mom," her voice was tight with anger. "Why didn't you tell me about Dad's farm or the oil? His brothers just called me offering a fair settlement if I help them contest the will. What the hell is going on?" So they'd already reached out to my daughter, already started working on her, knowing she was grieving and vulnerable. The realization ignited something fierce and protective in my chest. "I'll explain everything later, I promised. But Jenna, don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. These men are not our friends." "Mom, if there's money involved, we need to be smart about this." "This isn't about money," I interrupted. "This is about what your father wanted. Please trust me on this." After a moment of heavy silence, she sighed. "Fine, but call me back as soon as you can." I hung up and opened the door to face a young RCMP officer flanked by 3 Mitchell men whose expressions ranged from smug to openly hostile. "Mrs. Mitchell." "I'm Constable Wilson," he said. "These gentlemen have a court order requesting an inspection of the property as part of an ongoing estate dispute." I smiled calmly. "Of course, Constable. But first I think you should see these." I held out the blue folder. My husband anticipated this exact situation. Robert stepped forward with a dismissive wave. "Family property disputes are complicated, Constable. My sister-in-law is understandably emotional and confused." Actually, I interrupted. "I'm neither emotional nor confused. I'm a widow standing on property that legally belongs to me, facing 3 strangers who happen to share my late husband's DNA, but apparently none of his integrity." The constable took the folder and began examining the contents. The Mitchell brothers exchanged glances, their confidence visibly wavering. The constable looked up. "These appear to be in order, Mrs. Mitchell. A clear deed transfer, properly notarized statements, even certified bank records." He turned to the brothers. "Gentlemen, I don't see grounds for forcing an inspection today. This appears to be a matter for the civil courts." Robert's face flushed with anger. "This is outrageous. That woman has no right to property that's been in the Mitchell family for generations. That woman," I interjected calmly, "is Joshua Mitchell's wife of 24 years, and I have every legal right to be here." As the brothers reluctantly retreated to their vehicle, I felt a strange sense of both loss and discovery. The husband I thought I knew completely had kept secrets, some painful, others breathtakingly beautiful. I closed the door and walked back to the desk. Tomorrow's video awaited. Outside, the Mitchell brothers might have lost this initial skirmish, but their expressions as they drove away made one thing abundantly clear. The war for Maple Creek Farm had only just begun. I spent that night in the farmhouse unable to sleep, walking from room to room like a ghost haunting my own life. Every corner revealed another carefully chosen detail that Joshua had selected with me in mind. The throw pillows in colors I'd mentioned loving once 15 years ago. The specific brand of a coffee maker I'd admired at a friend's house. Books I'd said someday I'd like to read arranged on shelves built to my exact height for easy reaching. He'd been cataloging my preferences for decades, storing them away for this moment I'd never known was coming. At dawn, I found myself drawn back to the stables. The 6 horses were already awake, moving restlessly in their stalls with that particular energy animals have in the early morning. I stood at the entrance, breathing in the smell of hay and leather and horse, a scent that had always meant freedom to me, even when my life had contained none. "You're up early." Ellis appeared from the tack room carrying buckets of grain. "Couldn't sleep, I imagined, first night in a new place, especially under these circumstances." "Something like that," I admitted, watching him move efficiently through his morning routine. "Ellis, can I ask you something? When Joshua was here, did he seem happy, like he was at peace with what he was doing?" Ellis paused, considering the question with the care it deserved. "He seemed driven, ma'am, purposeful, like a man on a mission to get everything exactly right before time ran out." Happy isn't quite the word I'd use, more like satisfied that he was doing something meaningful with whatever time he had left. The black Frisian midnight pushed his massive head over the stall door and nuzzled my shoulder with surprising gentleness for such a powerful animal. I stroked his neck, feeling the warmth of living muscle under sleek coat, the solidity of something real in a world that had become increasingly surreal. "Your husband said you used to ride when you were younger," Ellis continued. "Said you gave it up when life got busy, when being practical seemed more important than being happy. He wanted you to have that back, that feeling of freedom you got from being on a horse." "I haven't been on a horse in 20 years, I said, suddenly aware of how much I'd let slip away, how many pieces of myself I'd abandoned in the name of responsibility and adulthood. Well, Ellis smiled. "Muscle memory's a funny thing. Body remembers even when the mind thinks it's forgotten." Midnight, they're as gentle as a lamb despite his size. Your husband made sure of it, tested his temperament personally before purchasing him. If you wanted to try, I could saddle him up, lead you around the paddock until you get your bearings again. The idea terrified and exhilarated me in equal measure. Yes, I heard myself say, yes, I'd like that very much. 20 minutes later, I was mounted on Midnight's broad back, my legs remembering how to grip my hands, remembering how to hold the reins with just enough pressure to communicate without demanding. Ellis walked beside us as we circled the paddock, offering quiet corrections to my rusty form, but mostly just letting me rediscover the feeling I'd thought was lost forever. The rhythm of the horse's movement, the connection between rider and animal, the sense of being part of something larger than my own small worries, it all came flooding back. Tears streamed down my face as we walked. Grief and joy tangled together so tightly I couldn't separate them. Joshua had given me this. Even dying, even keeping terrible secrets, he'd been thinking about what would make me whole again. We rode for an hour, gradually increasing from a walk to a trot as my confidence returned. By the time Ellis helped me dismount, my legs were shaking and my back ached, but I felt more alive than I had in months, maybe years. "Thank you," I told Ellis, meaning it for more than just the riding lesson. "Your husband would want you to use everything he built here," Ellis said. "Not just look at it like a museum to his memory, but actually live in it, make it yours. That's what all this was for, ma'am. Your life, not his death." Back at the house, I showered and changed, then forced myself to eat breakfast, even though my appetite had been erratic since Joshua's death. I was finishing my coffee when my phone rang. Jenna again, and this time her voice carried a different tone, less angry and more confused. "Mom, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about not trusting Dad's brothers. I did some research last night, looked them up online, and there's some weird stuff. Articles about Robert's company being investigated, a complaint filed against Alan with the Bar Association that got quietly settled. Nothing concrete, but it made me wonder why Dad never mentioned having brothers if they were successful, prominent people. Your father had his reasons for the distance he kept from them," I said carefully. "Reasons? I'm only just beginning to understand myself. The thing is, Mom, they were really nice to me on the phone. Really concerned about family, about making sure you and I were taken care of, about honoring Dad's legacy. They didn't sound like the villains you're making them out to be." "Jenna," I sighed. "The most dangerous people often don't sound dangerous. They sound reasonable and caring and concerned right up until the moment they're not. Your father spent 3 years preparing for exactly this situation. He knew they'd come, knew they'd be charming, knew they'd try to divide us. Please trust his judgment if you can't trust mine yet." There was a long pause on her end. "I just wish Dad had told us about all this while he was alive. I feel like I'm learning he was a completely different person than the father I thought I knew." "He was exactly the father you knew," I corrected gently. "He was also other things. Complicated things, a man with a painful past and difficult family and secrets he kept to protect us." "People contain multitudes, sweetheart. Your father was no exception." "Are you staying at the farm?" she asked. "Or coming back to Minnesota?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "There's so much here to process, so many decisions to make. But I think I need to stay at least a few more days, try to understand what Joshua was thinking when he created all this." After we hung up, I opened the laptop again, curiosity overcoming my reluctance to face more revelations. Today's video showed Joshua in the library, surrounded by the books he'd collected for me, looking more tired than in yesterday's recording, but still determinedly cheerful. "Good morning, Kat. I hope Ellis showed you the horses properly, let you meet them individually. If he's following my instructions, he might have even talked you into riding Midnight. I hope you did. I hope you're already starting to remember what it feels like to do things purely because they bring you joy, not because they're practical or responsible or expected." He shifted in his chair, wincing slightly in a way that suggested his illness was already taking its toll when this was filmed. "Today, I want to tell you about my brothers, about why I never brought you to Canada to meet them, why I kept my distance even when it meant cutting myself off from my entire childhood history." I leaned closer to the screen, hungry for understanding. "Robert, Alan, and David aren't bad men exactly," Joshua continued. "They're products of how they were raised, just like I am. Our father played us against each other from the time we were children, rewarded cruelty, punished weakness, created an environment where only the ruthless survived. My brothers learned those lessons well. I refused to, which made me their favorite target. His expression darkened with old pain. They stole from me, Kat. Not just money, though. There was plenty of that. They stole opportunities, relationships, even my first serious girlfriend who Robert seduced just to prove he could. By the time I was 18, I understood that staying near them meant being destroyed by them piece by piece. So I left, changed my name slightly from Jonathan to Joshua, started over in the States, and built a life where kindness mattered more than dominance. I thought of the men I'd faced yesterday, their easy entitlement, their assumption that they could simply take what they wanted through force of will and legal maneuvering. Joshua had escaped, that had chosen a different path, had become someone gentle and good, despite the cruelty he'd been raised in. But family has a way of finding you, especially when there's money involved, Joshua said. When I bought back the farm 3 years ago, I knew eventually they'd discover it. Knew they'd come looking for their cut, convinced themselves they were entitled to property I'd purchased with my own money. That's why I prepared, why I documented everything, why I'm leaving you these videos. You need to understand what you're facing, Kat. They're not interested in family connection or honoring my memory. They want the farm because it's become valuable, and they'll use any method necessary to take it from you. The video showed him pulling out files, the same ones I'd found in the desk drawer yesterday. I've collected evidence of every questionable thing they've done in their professional lives. It's your insurance policy, your leverage if they push too hard. Don't be afraid to use it if necessary. They respond to strength, not sentiment. He looked directly into the camera with an intensity that made me catch my breath. I know this isn't what you signed up for when you married me, Kat. You thought you were getting a quiet engineer with an uncomplicated past. Instead, you got me damaged and secretive and apparently incapable of dying without causing chaos. I'm sorry for that, but I'm not sorry for loving you enough to fight for your future, even after I'm gone. The video ended, and I sat in silence processing everything he'd revealed. Joshua had known exactly what was coming, had prepared me as thoroughly as possible, had given me weapons to fight a battle I'd never expected to face. The question was whether I had the strength to use them. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Mitchell. This is Alan Mitchell. My brothers and I would like to apologize for yesterday's confrontation. We came on too strong, approached the situation poorly. Could we meet again, perhaps for coffee in town, to discuss things more calmly? We're staying at the Maple Ridge Hotel if you'd like to suggest a time and place. I stared at the message, hearing Joshua's warning echoing in my mind. They were regrouping, changing tactics, trying the friendly approach since the aggressive one had failed. Everything in me wanted to ignore them, to hide behind locked gates and legal documents until they gave up and went away. But I'd never been a coward, and I wasn't about to start now. I typed back, tomorrow, 10 a.m., the cafe on Main Street. I'll be there. His response came immediately. Thank you, Catherine. We appreciate your willingness to talk. Family should be able to work things out. Family, I muttered to the empty room. They had no idea what that word actually meant. I spent the rest of that day exploring the farm more thoroughly, discovering the meditation garden behind the barn that Joshua had mentioned in his video, a peaceful space with stone benches and carefully chosen plants that would bloom in sequence throughout the growing season. Finding the greenhouse stocked with seeds for my favorite flowers, another detail he'd remembered from casual conversations years ago. Locating the small chapel he'd restored, non-denominational but beautiful, with stained glass windows that caught the afternoon light and threw colored patterns across wooden pews. Every discovery was another love letter, another piece of evidence that Joshua had seen me clearly enough to know what I'd need after he was gone. Not just financial security or physical comfort, but spaces for healing, for growing, for becoming someone new while honoring who I'd been. That evening, I made myself dinner in the kitchen Joshua had designed for me, using the professional appliances I'd once joked about wanting, cooking a meal for one in a house built for a future I'd never get to share with him. The loneliness was crushing, made worse by being surrounded by so much thoughtfulness and care. He'd given me everything except himself. I was washing dishes when I heard vehicles approaching again. Through the window, I watched 3 cars arrive, the Mitchell brothers' SUV flanked by 2 others. My stomach dropped. They'd agreed to meet tomorrow in town, so why were they showing up at the farm tonight? I dried my hands and went to the front door without opening it. Through the glass, I could see Robert approaching with several other people, men in suits carrying briefcases, looking official and intimidating. Catherine, Robert called. "We need to talk. We have an injunction from the Canadian court requiring you to allow an inspection and inventory of the property pending resolution of our claim." I pulled out my phone and called the attorney whose card Mr. Winters had given me back in Minnesota, a Canadian lawyer named Morrison, who specialized in estate disputes. He answered on the second ring. "Mr. Morrison, I'm at Maple Creek Farm and Joshua's brothers are here with what they claim is a court injunction." "What do I do?" "Don't let them in," he said immediately. An injunction would have been served through proper channels, not delivered personally by the interested parties. "They're trying to intimidate you into granting access they don't legally have. Tell them all communication needs to go through attorneys and close the door." I relayed this to Robert, whose face darkened with anger. "This is absurd. We're trying to be reasonable here." "Then be reasonable through proper legal channels," I replied. "All communication goes through my attorney from this point forward." "You're making a mistake, Catherine." Alan stepped forward. "We have rights to this property regardless of what Joshua's manipulated documents say. Those documents were reviewed by 3 independent attorneys and have been filed with the Canadian Land Registry I shot back. They're not manipulated, they're legitimate, and you know it. That's why you're here trying to bully me instead of going through the courts." "We'll see you in court then," Robert said coldly. "And when we prove Joshua wasn't competent when he made these arrangements, when we show how you manipulated a dying man, you'll lose everything. The farm, the oil rights, your reputation, all of it." "Get off my property," I said, surprised by the steel in my own voice. "Now." They left, but the threat hung in the air like smoke. I called Ellis, told him what happened, asked him to inform the security company Joshua had contracted to monitor the cameras more closely. Then I called Mr. Morrison back. "They're going to claim Joshua wasn't mentally competent," I told him. "Try to prove he was delusional or manipulated when he made these arrangements." "Let them try," Morrison replied calmly. "We have medical records showing he was fully competent right up until his death. We have testimony from multiple witnesses, including his American attorney, who can verify his state of mind. We have the videos he made, which demonstrate clear thinking and planning. They're grasping at straws, Mrs. Mitchell. The question is whether you're prepared for a potentially lengthy legal battle." I thought of Joshua's videos, his careful planning, his determination to protect me even after death. "I'm prepared," I said. "Whatever it takes." That night I watched 3 more of Joshua's videos in sequence, listening to him explain his childhood in painful detail, the cruelty of his brothers, the indifference of his father, the loneliness of being the youngest and weakest in a family that valued dominance above all else. Understanding finally why he'd built such a careful, gentle life with me, why he'd been so devoted to creating safety and peace after growing up in chaos and competition. In the 3rd video, he addressed the legal battle directly, as if he could see into the future. "If my brothers are fighting you in court, Kat, don't be afraid. I've left you everything you need to win. But more importantly, don't let their ugliness make you ugly. Don't let their cruelty make you cruel. Win, because you're stronger and smarter and better prepared, not because you're willing to sink to their level. That's how I beat them, by refusing to play their games. That's how you'll beat them too." The next morning, I dressed carefully for the meeting with the Mitchell brothers, choosing professional clothes that projected confidence I didn't entirely feel. I arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early, claimed a table with good sightlines to the entrance, and ordered coffee I didn't particularly want, just to have something to do with my hands. Robert, Allen, and David arrived exactly on time, a calculated punctuality meant to show respect while asserting control. They settled into chairs around my table with expressions that managed to be both sympathetic and predatory. "Catherine, thank you for meeting with us," Robert began. "We owe you an apology for last night's approach. We were frustrated by yesterday's events and acted inappropriately." "Showing up at my home with fake legal documents wasn't frustration," I replied evenly. "It was intimidation. Let's not pretend otherwise." "Fair enough," Allen acknowledged. "We're all under stress here, grieving Joshua's death, dealing with complex legal and financial issues. Perhaps we can start over with more honesty on all sides." "I'm listening," I said, though every instinct told me this was another manipulation, a different approach toward the same goal. David leaned forward, his expression carefully crafted for sincerity. We understand Joshua purchased the farm legally from our father. We're not disputing that. What we're proposing is that he intended for it to remain in the family for all of us, not just for his wife, who has no connection to Canadian heritage or Mitchell history. I have every connection that matters, I countered. I'm his widow. He left it to me specifically and intentionally. But did he understand what he was doing? Robert pressed. Did he fully comprehend the value of what he was signing over to you? Our father was notoriously easy to manipulate in his final years, and Joshua had just received a terminal diagnosis. People don't think clearly in those circumstances. So now we get to the real strategy, I said. You can't challenge the legality of the purchase, so you'll attack Joshua's mental state instead. Paint him as confused or impaired. Paint me as a manipulative wife who took advantage. We're simply asking reasonable questions, Alan replied in his lawyer voice. Questions a court will ask as well. Joshua kept this property secret from you for 3 years. He made elaborate arrangements without your knowledge. He created videos instead of having honest conversations. These aren't the actions of someone thinking clearly. These are the actions of someone who knew his family would do exactly what you're doing right now, I shot back. He prepared for your greed, your entitlement, your absolute certainty that you deserve something you have no claim to. And he prepared me to fight you. Robert's mask slipped, revealing genuine anger underneath. This isn't a fight you can win, Catherine. We have resources connections lawyers who specialize in exactly these kinds of disputes. You're a high school teacher from Minnesota who's never been in a courtroom. You're out of your depth. Maybe I acknowledged. Or maybe you're underestimating me the same way you underestimated Joshua your entire lives. Maybe that's your fatal flaw, assuming anyone who doesn't fight dirty must be weak. The three brothers exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then Robert played what he clearly thought was his trump card. We spoke with your daughter yesterday, Catherine. Jenna seems quite reasonable, quite interested in understanding the full family situation. She expressed concern about your isolation, your emotional state since Joshua's death. She's worried about you making decisions from a place of grief rather than clear thinking. The manipulation was so blatant, so calculated to divide me from my daughter, that I actually felt relieved. This was exactly what Joshua had predicted, exactly what he'd warned me about in his videos. They were following his script perfectly, which meant my response was already prepared. Jenna is an adult who can make her own decisions about relationships, I said calmly. But I should mention that last night I showed her Joshua's videos. All of them, including the ones where he explains in detail why he cut contact with you, what you did to him growing up, how you stole from him. She now understands exactly what kind of men you are. It was a lie I hadn't shown Jenna the videos yet, but the effect on the brothers was immediate and gratifying. Robert's face flushed dark red. Alan's careful lawyer composure cracked. David actually flinched. You had no right, Robert started, but I cut him off. I had every right. She's my daughter. They're my videos left to me by my husband. And now she knows the truth you were trying to hide behind your concerned uncle act. I stood gathering my purse, done with this charade of a meeting. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to drop your legal challenges. You're going to leave me and Jenna alone, and in exchange those files Joshua compiled about your business practices, stay private. Or you can keep fighting, keep pushing, and I'll make sure every regulatory body and law enforcement agency gets copies. Your careers will be over, your reputation's destroyed, and you still won't get the farm. You're bluffing, David said, but his voice lacked conviction. Try me, I replied. Test whether I'm as weak and emotional as you think I am. Joshua didn't just leave me evidence, he left me the will to use it. He spent 3 years making sure I'd be strong enough to stand up to you. Don't make the mistake of thinking his preparation was wasted. I walked out of the cafe into brilliant morning sunshine, my hands shaking, but my head clear. Behind me, I could hear the brothers arguing in heated whispers, their carefully planned meeting having gone catastrophically wrong. My phone rang as I reached my car. Jenna. Mom, what did you say to Dad's brothers? Robert just called me sounding furious, saying you'd poisoned my mind against them with lies and fabricated evidence. I didn't lie about anything, I told her. But Jenna, I need you to trust me completely right now. They're going to try to turn you against me to make you think I'm unstable or manipulative. Can you just trust me for a few more days until I can explain everything properly? She was quiet for a long moment. Dad trusted you enough to leave you everything. That has to mean something. Yes, Mom, I trust you. Relief flooded through me so powerfully I had to lean against the car. Thank you, sweetheart. That means more than you know. One more thing, she added. I'm coming to Canada. Flying out tomorrow. Whatever's happening, we should face it together. After we hung up, I sat in my car watching the cafe entrance, waiting to see what the Mitchell brothers would do next. They emerged 10 minutes later, their body language broadcasting defeat and rage in equal measure. They'd underestimated me, underestimated Joshua's preparation, underestimated the power of a woman who'd finally been given permission to be strong. I drove back to Maple Creek Farm, feeling something I hadn't felt since Joshua's death. Not happiness exactly, but purpose, direction. The sense that I was finally fighting the right battle instead of just enduring whatever life threw at me. Ellis met me at the stable, reading my expression with the intuition of someone who'd spent a lifetime observing people. Went well, I take it. As well as could be expected, I replied. They showed their hand completely, which means now I know exactly what I'm dealing with. Your husband said you were tougher than you looked. Ellis smiled. Said people made the mistake of assuming quiet meant weak, that you'd surprise anyone who pushed hard enough. He was right about a lot of things, I acknowledged. I'm only now realizing how much. That afternoon, I spent 3 hours in the hidden bunker beneath the barn, reviewing every piece of evidence Joshua had compiled on his brothers. Financial records showing suspicious transactions, email chains discussing ethically questionable deals, witness statements from former employees alleging everything from tax fraud to client manipulation. It was comprehensive, damning, and exactly the weapon Joshua had promised to leave me. But it was the personal files that revealed the most about Joshua's pain. His brothers hadn't just stolen money from him, they'd systematically destroyed his confidence, his relationships, his sense of belonging anywhere. They'd made him feel worthless and then mocked him for leaving to build a better life. Understanding this, understanding the depth of what he'd survived, made his kindness to me and Jenna all the more remarkable. He'd refused to let their cruelty make him cruel. I was reviewing the last file when Ellis appeared at the bunker entrance. Ma'am, you have visitors. Not the brothers this time. A woman and her son. They claim to have information about Joshua that you need to hear. I closed the files quickly and followed Ellis back up to the main house, my mind racing with possibilities. Who would show up claiming to have information about Joshua? Another trap set by his brothers? Someone trying to exploit my vulnerable position? Or something genuine that Joshua hadn't anticipated in all his careful planning? The woman waiting in the living room was perhaps 45, with kind eyes and nervous hands that twisted a purse strap continuously. The boy beside her looked to be in his early 20s, tall and lanky, with an awkward grace that reminded me painfully of how Jenna had looked at that age. They both stood when I entered, the woman's face flooding with relief and anxiety in equal measure. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm Sarah Beaumont. This is my son Marcus. I know this is unexpected and probably unwelcome, but we've driven 6 hours from Saskatoon because there's something you need to know about your husband, something his brothers don't want you to find out. I gestured for them to sit, my instincts telling me this wasn't a threat, even as my mind cataloged exit routes and Ellis's reassuring presence in the doorway. What could you possibly know about Joshua that I don't? Sarah glanced at her son, drew a deep breath, and said the words that would shatter everything. I thought I understood about my husband's family. Marcus is Joshua's nephew, his brother's son, but not from Robert Allen or David, from Thomas, the brother Joshua never told you about because he never met him himself. I'm sorry, I said slowly, trying to process what she'd just claimed. Joshua didn't have a brother named Thomas. He had 3 brothers, all of whom I've unfortunately become acquainted with recently. He had 4 brothers, Sarah corrected gently. Thomas was born 3 years after Joshua, the result of their father's long-term affair with my mother. Joshua's father kept two families for decades, Mrs. Mitchell. One legitimate and public in Alberta, one secret and shameful in Saskatchewan. Thomas died 2 years ago in a car accident, never having known his half-brothers existed. But before he died, he learned the truth about his parentage, and he asked me to find Joshua if anything ever happened to him. Marcus spoke for the first time, his voice steady, despite obvious nervousness. My father received a letter from a lawyer shortly before his death. It detailed his true parentage, included medical information about hereditary conditions in the Mitchell family, and mentioned Joshua specifically. My dad wanted to reach out, but he was scared, didn't know how Joshua would react to learning he had another brother. Then the accident happened before he could decide. Why come to me now, I asked, still struggling to believe this revelation. Why not approach Joshua's other brothers? They're the ones contesting the will, claiming family rights to the property. Because we did approach them, Sarah said, her voice hardening. 2 weeks ago, after we learned about Joshua's death and the legal battle over the farm. Robert, Alan, and David made it very clear we weren't welcome in the family. Said my relationship with their father was ancient history, that Marcus had no claim to Mitchell heritage or property, and that if we tried to insert ourselves into the estate dispute, they'd destroy us legally and financially. So you came to me hoping I'd be more sympathetic, I asked, not bothering to hide my skepticism. Hoping the widow might be easier to manipulate than the brothers. No, Marcus said, firmly, meeting my eyes directly. We came because my father's lawyer said Joshua knew about us, had known for at least 3 years. The same lawyer who informed my dad about his parentage also told him that Joshua Mitchell had requested the information, had paid for the research, had apparently been trying to locate his other half-siblings. We came because if Joshua knew we existed and never reached out, we thought you should know why. We thought maybe he left information about us, maybe even left something for us. The pieces were clicking together in my mind with horrible clarity. Joshua's videos had mentioned knowing things about his family that his brothers didn't, having leverage they couldn't anticipate. I'd assumed he meant the financial crimes he'd documented. But this was something deeper, something that explained why he'd been so certain his brothers would lose any fight over the farm. Wait here, I told them, standing abruptly. Don't leave, don't touch anything. I'll be right back. I went to the laptop and scrolled through the video files, frantically looking for anything that might reference this revelation. There, about 3 months into the future sequence, was a file titled, When Thomas's Family Finds You. My hands shook as I clicked it open. Joshua's face appeared looking more tired than in earlier recordings, the illness clearly progressing. Hello, Kat. If you're watching this, then Sarah Beaumont and her son Marcus have found their way to Maple Creek Farm. I've been expecting them, though. I hoped it might be later, after you'd had more time to settle in and process everything else. He leaned forward, his expression intense. Everything they've told you is true. I have another half-brother, Thomas, born from my father's decades-long affair with a woman in Saskatoon. I only learned about this 3 years ago when I was researching my heart condition and discovered inconsistencies in our family medical records. The investigation I commissioned uncovered the entire sordid story. I paused the video, needing a moment to absorb this. Joshua had known he had another brother, had apparently tried to connect with him, and had never mentioned any of it to me. Another secret in a growing collection of them. Thomas died before I could contact him. Joshua continued when I resumed the video. A car accident that happened 3 days before I planned to fly to Saskatoon to meet him. I've always wondered if I'd moved faster, reached out sooner, whether we might have had time to know each other. But wondering doesn't change anything, so I did the next best thing. I made sure his son Marcus would be taken care of, that Sarah would have resources to ensure Thomas's legacy didn't die with him. The video showed him pulling out documents. In the safe behind the painting in my study is a trust fund I established for Marcus Beaumont. It's substantial enough to pay for his education, to give him the opportunities his father never had because my father refused to acknowledge him. Sarah doesn't know about this. I wanted to tell them personally, but if you're watching this video, then I'm gone, and you'll need to handle it. He looked directly into the camera with an expression I'd come to recognize as his most serious. Kat, this is important. My brothers Robert, Alan, and David cannot know about Thomas's family. If they learn there's another heir, even an illegitimate one, they'll do everything possible to eliminate Marcus as a threat. They'll claim his existence proves the whole family structure was illegitimate, try to invalidate all property transfers, including my purchase of the farm. Having Marcus show up complicates everything, but it also gives us leverage. I frowned at the screen, not understanding his logic yet. Marcus is proof that my father kept massive secrets from his legitimate children, that the whole Mitchell family mythology is built on lies and betrayals. If my brothers push their legal challenge too far, threaten to destroy you in court, Marcus's existence becomes your nuclear option. Proof that the family they're claiming sacred rights to was rotten from the foundation, that my father's intentions about inheritance mean nothing because he was deceiving everyone about everything. The video ended, and I sat staring at the blank screen, understanding finally the full scope of Joshua's strategy. He'd found another brother lost him before they could meet, then set up elaborate protections for that brother's family, while simultaneously creating leverage against his other brother's claims. Every piece fit together, with the precision of a Swiss watch, each element supporting and reinforcing the others. I returned to the living room where Sarah and Marcus waited, with barely contained tension. They both stood when I entered, reading something in my expression that made Sarah's eyes fill with tears. "He knew about you," I said simply. "Joshua knew about Thomas, tried to contact him before he died, and after Thomas's death, he set up a trust fund for Marcus. He left a video explaining everything, instructions for how I should handle your appearance." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, muffling a sob. "He did. After everything our families went through, after how his father treated my mother and Thomas, he still cared enough to provide for Marcus. Joshua spent his life being better than the family he came from," I replied, surprised by the conviction in my voice. "He refused to let their cruelty make him cruel, their selfishness make him selfish. Of course he provided for Thomas's son. It's exactly what he would do." Marcus was blinking rapidly, fighting tears. "I never knew him. Never got to thank him. My dad talked about maybe having other family out there, about his father being part of this whole different world we weren't allowed to access. I used to imagine meeting my uncles being accepted into a bigger family. Then when we finally did meet them, when Robert and Alan and David made it clear we were nothing to them, just an embarrassment, they wanted to disappear. It felt like proof that we were the shameful secret everyone wished had never existed. "You're not a secret anymore," I told him. "You're family. The kind Joshua chose to acknowledge and protect, which means more than blood ever could." "There's something else you should know," Sarah said hesitantly. "When we met with Robert, Allen, and David 2 weeks ago, they offered us money, a substantial amount, to sign documents stating we had no claim to Mitchell family assets, that we understood Thomas was never legitimately part of the family, that we'd never contact anyone about our connection to them. They wanted to buy our silence before the estate dispute went to court." "Did you sign?" I asked, already knowing the answer from their presence here, but needing to hear it confirmed. "No," Marcus said firmly. "They were offering money in exchange for erasing my father's existence, for pretending he didn't matter. I couldn't do that, not for any amount. My dad deserved better than to be disappeared, because acknowledging him was inconvenient for his brothers. This was exactly the ammunition I needed. Joshua's brothers had knowingly tried to conceal the existence of another heir, had attempted to buy off Thomas's family to keep them quiet during estate proceedings. Any judge would see that as evidence of bad faith, as proof their claims of caring about family legacy were fraudulent. I need you both to write down everything that happened in your meeting with the brothers," I told them. "Every word they said, every document they showed you, every threat or promise they made. I need dates times witnesses if there were any. Can you do that?" They both nodded, Sarah already pulling out her phone. I recorded part of the conversation, she admitted. Not the whole thing, because they noticed and made me stop, but I got about 10 minutes, including Robert explicitly offering $50,000 for our signatures and silence. "Perfect," I said, feeling pieces click into place. That recording, combined with Joshua's video and the trust fund he established, proves intent on both sides. Shows that Joshua was trying to acknowledge and help Thomas's family, while his other brothers were trying to eliminate them as complications. "What do you want us to do?" Marcus asked. "We didn't come here to cause problems for you, Mrs. Mitchell. We just wanted to understand why Joshua reached out to my dad before he died, what it meant that he acknowledged us when no one else would. You're going to stay in town for a few days, I decided. There's a bed and breakfast about 5 miles from here. Nice place, I'll cover the cost. Tomorrow, my daughter arrives from Minnesota, and we're going to show her Joshua's videos, including the one about your family. Then we're all going to meet with my attorney and figure out how to use your existence to end this legal battle once and for all. After Sarah and Marcus left with directions to the bed and breakfast and promises to return in the morning, I called Mr. Morrison and explained the new development. His response was immediate and enthusiastic. "This is exactly what we need, Mrs. Mitchell." The brothers claimed they had family rights to the property, that Joshua's purchase somehow violated family loyalty and tradition. Now we can prove that family loyalty meant nothing to any of them, that the father who supposedly intended the farm for all his sons was hiding entire children from some of those sons. It completely undermines their moral authority while demonstrating Joshua's character. He's the only one who cared about family in any genuine way. Can they still win in court, I asked? Even with all this evidence, even with Joshua's clear intent and legal documents, is there any chance the brothers could still take the farm? "There's always a chance in litigation," Morrison replied honestly, "but it's shrinking rapidly. Between the documentation Joshua left, the evidence of the brothers' attempts to silence Thomas's family, and the trust fund proving Joshua's generous intent toward relatives who had no legal claim, we have a very strong position. The brothers' best option at this point would be to settle, accept they've lost, and walk away before this gets uglier." "Make it uglier," I said, surprising myself with the viciousness in my voice. "I want them to understand completely that they lost, that Joshua beat them even dying, that their greed and cruelty gained them nothing. Don't offer them a dignified exit. Make them crawl." As Mitchell Morrison said carefully, "I appreciate your anger, but sometimes the wisest course is to let defeated opponents surrender gracefully. Backing them into a corner might provoke desperate measures." They backed Joshua into corners. "His entire childhood," I replied. "They stole from him, betrayed him, tried to destroy him in every way possible. He spent his whole life being the bigger person, taking the high road, refusing to fight dirty. Well, he's dead now, and I'm not constrained by his ethics. I want them ruined." There was a long pause. Then Morrison said quietly, "I'll prepare the most aggressive strategy possible. But Mrs. Mitchell, be certain this is what you want. Once we go down this path, there's no walking it back." I'm certain I told him, and meant it, absolutely. That evening, I walked the property alone, as the sun set, trying to process everything that had happened in the past 48 hours. I'd gone from confused widow to determined fighter, from passive recipient of Joshua's gifts to active warrior protecting his legacy. The transformation felt both foreign and natural, like putting on clothes that fit perfectly, but weren't in a style I'd ever worn before. My phone rang as I reached the meditation garden. Jenna calling from the airport. "Mom, I'm boarding in 20 minutes. I'll be there tomorrow morning. Are you okay? You sounded strange on the phone earlier." "I'm better than okay," I told her honestly. "I'm starting to understand what your father wanted for me, what he saw in me, that I'd forgotten existed. He gave me permission to be strong, Jenna. He gave me weapons and told me it was okay to use them. I think I'm finally becoming the person he always believed I could be." "That sounds both awesome and slightly terrifying," she replied, with a hint of her normal humor. "Should I be worried you're having some kind of grief-induced breakdown?" "Probably," I admitted. "But it's the productive kind of breakdown, where you stop pretending to be smaller than you are because it makes other people more comfortable. Your father did that. His whole life made himself less threatening, more accommodating, more careful. I don't think I want to keep doing that." "Good," Jenna said firmly. "I never understood why you made yourself so quiet, Mom. You're brilliant and talented, and you always acted like you needed permission to take up space. If Dad's death gives you permission to stop apologizing for existing, then maybe it's not entirely a tragedy." After we hung up, I sat on one of the stone benches Joshua had placed in the garden and watched the last light fade from the sky. Tomorrow Jenna would arrive, and I'd show her the videos, introduce her to Marcus and Sarah, explain the full scope of what her father had planned and prepared. Together, we'd face whatever came next armed with truth and evidence and the kind of righteous anger that could move mountains. That night, I slept better than I had since Joshua's death, no longer haunted by questions about his secrets, but energized by understanding his strategy. He'd seen the battle coming and had armed me for it, given me every weapon I'd need to defeat enemies he couldn't face himself. It was a strange kind of love letter, this inheritance of warfare and leverage, but it was also the most thoughtful gift anyone had ever given me. Joshua had known exactly who I was under all the years of self-diminishment, and he'd built me a path back to that stronger self. The next morning, I was up before dawn, energized, despite minimal sleep preparing for Jenna's arrival, and the confrontation I knew was coming. Ellis found me in the stable at 6 a.m., already having fed and groomed 3 of the horses. "You're up early," he observed, taking over the grooming with practiced efficiency. "Big day ahead." "My daughter arrives this morning," I told him. "Then we're meeting with Joshua's nephew, the son of a brother none of the legitimate family knew existed. After that, we're going to my attorney's office to destroy Robert Allen and David's legal challenge so thoroughly they'll never try this again." Ellis paused mid-brushstroke. "Your husband said you had steel underneath all that gentleness. Said anyone who underestimated you was making a fatal mistake. Looks like he was right. He usually was," I acknowledged. "I'm only now realizing how much he saw that I couldn't see in myself." Jenna's flight landed at 9, and she'd rented a car at the airport. I waited on the front porch as she drove up the long driveway, watching her take in the property with wide eyes. She emerged from the car looking exhausted and wired simultaneously, the result of an early flight and too much coffee. "Mom," she breathed, looking around at the farm spread before us. "This is incredible. This is what Dad built for us," I corrected, pulling her into a fierce hug. "He built this for you and me, Jenna. Every detail chosen with us in mind. Come inside, I'll show you." I gave her the tour I'd never had, walking her through the house and pointing out all the thoughtful touches Joshua had included. The library filled with books I'd loved, the kitchen designed for my cooking style, the sunroom positioned for morning coffee, and finally, the art studio with its perfect northern light and all my old paintings preserved in the cabinet. Jenna cried when she saw the studio, understanding immediately what it represented. "He wanted you to paint again. He wanted you to be the person you were before life made you practical and careful. He wanted me to be free," I said simply, "and he gave me the means to be free, not just financially, but emotionally. He gave me permission to be strong." We spent the next 3 hours watching Joshua's videos together, starting from day 1 and watching in sequence so Jenna could see the full scope of his planning. She cried through most of them, grieving the father she'd lost, while meeting the father she'd never fully known. The man who'd kept secrets to protect them, who'd built elaborate defenses against enemies she hadn't known existed, who'd loved them both enough to plan their futures in meticulous detail. When we reached the video about Thomas and Marcus, Jenna's tears turned to shock. Dad had another brother, a whole other family his father kept secret, and he's the only one who tried to acknowledge them, I confirmed. The only one who set up a trust fund for Thomas's son, who wanted to meet his brother before time ran out. Robert Allen and David tried to pay them off to disappear to protect their version of family history. "That's disgusting," Jenna said flatly. "They're actually disgusting human beings." "Yes," I agreed, "which is why we're going to destroy them." Sarah and Marcus arrived at 11, as planned, nervous and uncertain, despite my previous reassurances. Jenna stood when they entered, studying Marcus with the intensity of someone looking for family resemblance. He had the Mitchell height and build, the same dark hair and strong features, but something in his expression was softer, more open than the predatory calculation I'd seen in Robert Allen and David. "You look like my dad," Jenna said finally. "Not exactly, but enough that I'd have known we were related if I'd seen you on the street." "Your dad was my uncle," Marcus replied. "I never got to meet him. Never got to know any of my father's family, except through stories my mom told. Stories about the other brothers who lived in this big house in Alberta, who had money and respect and everything my dad never got because his existence was shameful." "You're not shameful," Jenna said fiercely. "You're family. Real family, not the kind that only matters when there's money involved. We all drove to Mr. Morrison's office together, a united front against whatever Robert Allen and David might try next. Morrison met us in his conference room, spreading documents across the large table with the systematic precision of someone preparing for battle. "Mrs. Mitchell," he began, "I've reviewed everything you sent me last night, including Mrs. Beaumont's recording and Joshua's video about Thomas's family. I've also drafted a motion to dismiss the brothers' claims based on fraudulent representations and bad faith dealing. But before we file, I need to make certain you understand what will happen when this becomes public. Tell me," I said, settling into the chair at the head of the table like I belonged there. "The existence of Thomas and Marcus will become part of the court record. The media will pick it up because the Mitchell brothers are prominent businessmen, and this is exactly the kind of scandal that sells papers. Your husband's father will be exposed as a man who kept two families for decades, who lied to everyone, including the children he claimed to love. It won't be clean or quiet, Mrs. Mitchell. It will be messy and public and potentially humiliating for everyone involved." "Good," I said without hesitation. "Let the truth be messy and public. Let everyone see what the Mitchell family really was underneath all the respectability and success. Let Robert Allen and David answer questions about why they tried to bribe their brother's son to disappear." Morrison nodded slowly, something like respect showing in his eyes. "Then we'll file this afternoon. I expect the brothers will want to meet as soon as they see our motion. Probably try to negotiate a settlement to keep this out of open court." "Let them try," I replied. "But I'm not settling. I'm not giving them any piece of what Joshua built, any share of the farm or the oil rights or anything else. They get nothing except the satisfaction of knowing their brother was a better man than they could ever hope to be." After the meeting, we returned to Maple Creek Farm to wait for the inevitable response from the Mitchell brothers. It came faster than expected, Robert calling my phone at 3 p.m., with barely controlled rage vibrating through his voice. "What the hell do you think you're doing? Catherine Marcus Beaumont is a bastard with no claim to anything. Dragging him into this dispute is desperate and pathetic." "Marcus is Joshua's nephew," I replied calmly. "He has more right to be acknowledged than you do to steal property you never owned. And the fact that you tried to pay him off to hide his existence proves you knew his presence would destroy your fraudulent claims." "We'll bury you in court," Robert threatened. "We'll prove Joshua wasn't competent, that you manipulated him, that the whole farm purchase was a scheme cooked up while he wasn't thinking clearly." "Try it," I invited. "Please try it. Because the moment you claim Joshua wasn't competent, I release his videos showing how thoroughly he planned everything, how clearly he was thinking, how specifically he anticipated every move you'd make. And then I release the evidence he compiled about your business practices, about the client funds Allen misappropriated, about the insider trading Robert's firm engaged in, about David's creative accounting. You want to fight in court? Bring it. I'll destroy all three of you." The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Then Robert said quietly, his voice stripped of its usual arrogance. "What do you want, Catherine?" "I want you gone," I told him. "I want you to drop all legal challenges, sign documents, acknowledging the farm as mine, and disappear from my life and Jenna's life permanently. In exchange, Joshua's files stay private, and Marcus's existence doesn't get splashed across every newspaper in Canada as proof of your father's lies and your attempts to cover them up. That's it. You don't want money or property concessions or shared mineral rights. I don't want anything from you except your absence," I confirmed. "Joshua left me everything I need. I don't need your money, your property, or your approval. I just need you gone." He was quiet again, then said, "We'll need to consult with our attorneys." "You have 24 hours, I told him. "After that, I file everything publicly and let the courts sort it out. Your choice, Robert. Surrender gracefully or be destroyed publicly. Either way, I win, but one option is significantly less humiliating for you." I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking with adrenaline and something that felt like triumph. Jenna was watching me with an expression caught between shock and admiration. "Mom, that was badass. I've never heard you talk to anyone like that, like you had all the power and they had none." Maybe because I never had the power before, I replied. "Your father gave it to me along with permission to use it. He spent his life being gentle and accommodating, trying to rise above the cruelty of his family. But he also made sure that when he was gone, when I didn't have his protection anymore, I'd have weapons to protect myself. He's still taking care of us, Jenna. Even dead, he's still 3 steps ahead of everyone. That evening, the 4 of us had dinner together at the farm, an odd collection of people brought together by Joshua's legacy. Jenna and Marcus discovered they shared a sense of humor and a love of old movies. Sarah told stories about Thomas painting a picture of a man who'd struggled his whole life with the knowledge that his father had a whole other family that didn't acknowledge him. By the end of the meal, we weren't strangers anymore. We were family, the kind Joshua had believed in, based on choice and care rather than obligation and blood. The next morning, Morrison called with news I'd been expecting. The brothers have agreed to your terms. They're dropping all legal challenges and signing documents acknowledging your sole ownership of the farm. They want this done quietly through our offices with no public announcement, and the documents absolving Marcus of any claims I asked. I want it crystal clear that he's not part of this settlement, that his rights remain intact regardless of what his uncles sign. Already included, Morrison confirmed. Marcus has separate documentation establishing him as a Mitchell heir for purposes of the trust fund Joshua set up, but with no claims to the farm property. It's ironclad, Mrs. Mitchell. You've won. I'd won. Joshua's brothers had surrendered completely their greed and entitlement, gaining them exactly nothing. The farm was mine, the oil rights were mine, the future Joshua had built was secured exactly as he'd planned it. Against all odds and my own doubts, I'd become the warrior he'd believed I could be. But standing in the art studio later that afternoon, looking at the blank canvas, waiting for whatever I chose to create, I realized winning the legal battle was just the beginning. Joshua had given me more than property and financial security. He'd given me permission to become fully myself, to stop apologizing for taking up space, to stop making myself smaller, to accommodate other people's comfort. The real victory wasn't defeating his brothers. It was reclaiming the parts of myself I'd lost along the way. I picked up a brush for the first time in 20 years and began to paint. The brush felt strange in my hand after 2 decades, the weight unfamiliar, yet somehow right, like greeting an old friend after years of silence. I stood before the blank canvas for 20 minutes before making the first stroke, terror and exhilaration warring in my chest. What if I'd lost it completely? What if the artist I'd been at 23 was gone forever, buried under years of lesson plans and grocery lists, and the 1,000 small compromises that had turned me from Catherine, the painter, into Mrs. Mitchell, the practical high school teacher? Just start, I told myself, echoing advice I'd given nervous students countless times. Nothing has to be perfect, nothing has to be good. Just put paint on canvas and see what happens. The first strokes were tentative color studies, really testing how the paint behaved, how the brush responded, how my hand remembered movements, my brain thought were forgotten. But within an hour, something shifted. Muscle memory awakened. My eye began seeing in terms of light and shadow, again translating the view from the studio window into shapes and colors and composition. I wasn't good yet, wasn't anywhere near the skill level I'd once had, but I was painting. Actually painting for the first time in 20 years. Jenna found me 3 hours later, completely absorbed my clothes, splattered with paint and tears streaming down my face, without my even realizing I was crying. "Mom," she said softly from the doorway. "Are you okay?" I turned to her brush, still in hand, and laughed through my tears. "I'm painting Jenna. I'm actually painting again. I didn't think I could. Thought that part of me was dead. But it's not. It was just sleeping, waiting for permission to wake up." She crossed the room and pulled me into a fierce hug despite the paint covering my shirt. "Dad knew, didn't he? He knew this was still in you, still waiting. He knew me better than I knew myself," I admitted. "He saw through all the layers of practicality and responsibility to the person I'd been before. Life taught me to be careful. And he loved that person enough to build her a path back to herself." We stood there in the studio Joshua had created, holding each other and crying for the man who'd loved us enough to prepare for his own absence, who'd turned his death into a gift that kept giving long after he was gone. That evening, Marcus and Sarah joined us for dinner again, the 4 of us beginning to form the shape of family in this unexpected configuration. Marcus was hesitant at first, clearly uncertain of his place in our newly formed circle. But Jenna drew him out with questions about his father, about growing up knowing he had brothers who didn't acknowledge him, about what it felt like to suddenly be part of a legacy he'd been excluded from his entire life. It was weird, Marcus admitted, pushing food around his plate. Growing up, my dad would sometimes get this look like he was thinking about something far away and sad. My mom would tell me later those were the days he was wondering about his other family, about the brothers he'd never meet, about whether they ever thought about him, or if he was just a shameful secret they wanted to forget. He wasn't a secret to Joshua, I told him. Your father mattered enough that Joshua spent money and time tracking him down, wanting to meet him, wanting to acknowledge him as family. The fact that Thomas died before they could connect wasn't indifference, Marcus. It was terrible timing. I know that now, he said. But it would have meant everything to my dad to know it while he was alive, to know that one of his brothers cared enough to look for him. Joshua left you a substantial trust fund, I reminded him. He set it up after your father died, made provisions for your education and future. That's not the action of someone who wanted to forget Thomas existed. That's someone who cared deeply about family, real family, not the DNA version, but the chosen kind. What happens now? Sarah asked. Now that the legal battle is over, now that Robert and Alan and David have surrendered their claims, do we just go back to Saskatoon and pretend none of this happened? I'd been thinking about this question since the brothers' capitulation, turning over possibilities in my mind. You're welcome to stay connected to us if you want. Jenna and I aren't going anywhere. The farm is ours, our home now. Marcus is Joshua's nephew, which makes him Jenna's cousin, which makes you all family, whether the Mitchell brothers like it or not. Marcus looked up with hope flickering in his expression. You mean that we're not just convenient pawns you used to beat your husband's brothers in court? Your family, Jenna said firmly before I could answer. Real family, the kind Dad believed in. The kind based on actually caring about each other rather than just sharing DNA. If you want to be part of our lives, we want you in them. After dinner, I walked Sarah to her car, while Jenna and Marcus did the dishes together, their easy laughter drifting through the open kitchen window. Sarah turned to me before getting in her expression serious. Thank you, Catherine, for acknowledging Marcus, for making him feel like he matters. His whole life has been defined by not mattering to half his family. What you've done, what Joshua did, it's healing something in him I wasn't sure could be healed. Joshua understood what it felt like to be rejected by family, I replied. He lived it, survived it, and decided he'd never make anyone else feel that way if he could help it. I'm just following his example. You're doing more than following his example, Sarah said gently. You're honoring it, extending it, making it bigger than he could have made it alone. That studio upstairs you painting again, that's not just following Joshua's plan. That's becoming the person he always believed you were. After they left, I sat on the front porch in the darkness, exhausted, but unable to sleep, too wired from the day's emotions to settle. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I opened it. You've won, Catherine. Congratulations. But winning doesn't make you right, and it doesn't make Joshua's deceptions honorable. He kept secrets from everyone who loved him, manipulated situations from beyond the grave, and turned you into a weapon against his own family. Is that really the legacy you want to celebrate, Robert? I stared at the message for a long time, feeling the hook embedded in it, the attempt to plant doubt and guilt where there had been certainty. Joshua had kept secrets, massive ones, life-altering ones. He'd hidden his diagnosis, his property purchase, his knowledge of Thomas and Marcus, his elaborate plans for defeating his brothers. He'd manipulated from beyond the grave using videos and documents, and carefully planted evidence to orchestrate outcomes he wouldn't live to see. And he'd been absolutely right to do all of it. I typed back, Joshua kept secrets to protect the people he loved from people like you. He manipulated situations to ensure justice would be done after his death. He turned me into a weapon because weapons were necessary to fight men who respect nothing but strength. His legacy is one of love and protection and preparation. Yours is cruelty, greed, and entitlement. History will judge which mattered more. Don't contact me again. I blocked the number before he could respond, refusing to give him any more space in my head or heart. Joshua's brothers had lost completely, and they were grasping at anything that might restore some sense of power or control. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of my doubt. The next morning I woke early and went straight to the studio, pulled by the canvas like a physical need. The painting from yesterday was rough and unfinished, but it had bone structure potential. I worked on it for 3 hours, losing myself completely in color and form, in the meditation of creation that I'd forgotten could exist. Ellis found me at 10 with coffee and toast on a tray, shaking his head with amused fondness. "Your husband said you'd do this once you started painting again. Said you'd forget to eat, forget to sleep, forget everything except the canvas in front of you. He made me promise to check on you regularly, make sure you didn't starve to death in pursuit of art. He thought of everything." I marveled, accepting the coffee gratefully. "He had 3 years and a terminal diagnosis," Ellis replied. "Plenty of time to plan for every contingency. The remarkable thing isn't that he thought of everything, Mrs. Mitchell. It's that he cared enough to think of everything." That afternoon I was painting when I heard raised voices from downstairs, angry and overlapping in a way that sent adrenaline spiking through my system. I set down my brush and moved quickly to the staircase, hearing Jenna's voice sharp with fury. "Get out of this house right now before I call the police." I reached the ground floor to find David Mitchell in the entryway, disheveled and desperate, in a way his brothers had never allowed themselves to appear. Jenna stood between him and the rest of the house, her phone in her hand with 911 already dialed, but not yet called. "What's going on?" I asked, descending the stairs with more calm than I felt. David turned to me with wild eyes, grief and rage and desperation mixing into something nearly unrecognizable. "You don't understand what you've done. You've destroyed us, Catherine. Robert's firm is being investigated by 3 regulatory bodies. Alan's been suspended from practicing law pending ethics review. I've lost my position at the investment company. Everything we built is collapsing." "Good," I said simply. "That's what happens when you build on foundations of fraud and corruption. Eventually, it all comes down. We're family." He protested the word, sounding hollow in his mouth. "Joshua was our brother. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" "It meant everything to Joshua," I corrected. "He spent his whole life trying to rise above your cruelty, trying to be better than the family that raised him. And even dying, even knowing you'd come after everything he built, he tried to give you an out. He could have released all that evidence while he was alive, could have destroyed you years ago. Instead, he left it to me as protection, hoping I'd never have to use it. You forced my hand, David. You and Robert and Alan forced every single thing that's happened." "My father's dying," David said, and something in his voice shifted from anger to genuine anguish. "His heart is failing, just like Joshua's did, just like the condition that runs in our family. He needs a transplant, and there are no matches available. I came to ask if Jenna would be tested, if she might be compatible." The audacity of it hit me like a physical blow. "You tried to steal from us, threatened us, attempted to destroy us in court. And now you want my daughter to donate part of her liver to save the man who made all your lives a competition for his affection." "He's dying," David repeated. "I know we don't deserve mercy or help or anything from you. I know we've been terrible, that we destroyed Joshua's childhood and tried to destroy what he left you. But he's still dying, Catherine. He's still my father." Jenna had lowered her phone, clearly conflicted. "Mom," she said quietly, "I don't know what the right thing is here. The right thing is whatever you decide it is," I told her firmly. "This is your body, your choice, your decision. Not mine, not David's, not anyone else's. If you want to be tested, I'll support you. If you want them to leave and never come back, I'll support that too." "Can I think about it, Jenna?" asked David. "Have a day to process this, without pressure?" "We don't have much time," David said. "Every day that passes is another day closer to complete organ failure." "Then you should have thought about that before you tried to steal from his granddaughter," I snapped. "Before you spent weeks treating her like an obstacle to overcome, rather than a person who might have helped if you'd approached with honesty instead of manipulation." "Get out, David. If Jenna decides she wants to be tested, we'll contact your father's doctors directly. Otherwise, leave us alone." He left, shoulders sagging with defeat, and I pulled Jenna into a hug as she started crying. "I don't know what to do, Mom. Part of me wants to tell them to go to hell after everything they've done, but part of me keeps thinking about what Dad would want, whether he'd want me to let his brother die when I could potentially help. Your father would want you to make the choice that lets you sleep at night, I told her. He'd never want you to sacrifice yourself out of obligation or guilt. But he'd also understand if you chose to help, if mercy mattered more to you than justice. There's no wrong answer here, sweetheart. Just the answer that's right for you. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. Can I watch more of Dad's videos? Maybe there's something in them about this situation about his father, or his feelings about family obligations. We spent the rest of that afternoon watching videos in sequence, both of us searching for guidance Joshua might have left about exactly this scenario. We found it 3 months into the future sequence, a video titled, "If They Ask for Medical Help." Joshua's face appeared looking more tired than in earlier recordings, the progression of his illness visible in the hollows under his eyes and the tightness around his mouth. "Hello, Kat. If you're watching this, then one of my brothers has approached you or Jenna asking for medical help. Probably organ donation, possibly for my father, who likely has the same heart condition that killed me. I've been expecting this request ever since I learned about my diagnosis 3 years ago." He shifted in his chair, gathering his thoughts. "Here's what I want you to know. My father was a cruel man who pitted his sons against each other for sport, who kept a secret second family while pretending to be a pillar of morality, who made my childhood a competition I could never win. He doesn't deserve mercy from anyone, least of all from you or Jenna, who he never acknowledged or cared about." Jenna's breath caught tears starting again. But Joshua continued, and I could hear the conflict in his voice. "He's still my father. Still the man who taught me to ride a horse and fix engines and appreciate the smell of hay in the morning. The good memories are tangled with the bad ones in ways I've never been able to separate. If I were alive and healthy, if the situation were reversed, and he needed part of my liver or a kidney, I honestly don't know what I'd do." He looked directly into the camera with an intensity that felt like he could see us across time. "So I'm not going to tell you what to do, Jenna. This has to be your decision, made with full knowledge of what you'd be giving to someone who doesn't deserve it and might never appreciate it. Your mother will support you either way because that's who she is. But I want you to know that whatever you decide, I'm proud of you. Choosing mercy when you have every right to choose justice takes courage. Choosing justice when someone's life hangs in the balance also takes courage. Either path is the right one if it's true to who you are." The video ended, and Jenna sat in silence for a long time, processing her father's words. Finally, she said, "I need to talk to Marcus and Sarah. They were excluded from this family for decades because of Robert's father's choices. They have a stake in this, too. We called them, and they drove over immediately, sensing the urgency in Jenna's voice. When she explained the situation, Marcus's reaction was immediate and visceral. "Don't do it," he said flatly. "Don't give that man anything. He spent his entire life lying to my father, pretending he didn't exist, denying him basic acknowledgement. My dad died never knowing his father's other sons, never getting answers about why he wasn't good enough to be acknowledged. Let Robert's father face the consequences of his own choices." "But he's still dying," Jenna argued. "Still someone's father and grandfather, even if he was a terrible one. I keep thinking about how I'd feel if it was my dad dying and someone could help but chose not to, out of anger over past wrongs." "Your dad's already dead," Marcus said more gently. "He died without ever meeting his brother Thomas, without acknowledging my father's existence, without even trying to make things right. Why should we help extend his brother's father's life when he helped destroy my father's?" "Because that's what Dad would have wanted," Jenna replied. "Not because Robert's father deserves it, but because being the kind of person who helps even when it's hard, even when it's unfair, that's what makes us better than they are." Sarah had been quiet, listening to both sides. "Marcus," she said finally, "you're angry. You have every right to be angry. But making someone else carry your anger by guilting them out of a choice they want to make isn't fair either. If Jenna wants to be tested, wants to potentially help, we have to respect that, even if we don't agree with it. I don't want to help," Jenna clarified. "I want to not carry the weight of choosing to let someone die when I could have potentially saved them. There's a difference." The distinction hit me hard. She wasn't being noble or forgiving. She was being practical about which burden she wanted to carry for the rest of her life. The burden of helping people who'd hurt us, or the burden of letting someone die when she might have saved them. Both were heavy, but she was choosing the one that aligned with who she wanted to be. Get tested, I told her. Find out if you're compatible. Then make the final decision with full information rather than hypotheticals. Maybe you're not a match, and the choice gets taken out of your hands. Maybe you are, and by then you'll have more clarity about what you can live with. The next morning we drove to the hospital in Calgary, where Robert's father was being treated. David met us in the lobby trying to maintain composure, but clearly shocked we'd actually shown up. Jenna's here to be tested for compatibility, I told him. Not because your father deserves her help, not because we've forgiven anything, but because my daughter wants to make this choice from a place of clarity rather than anger. Whatever the results are, you and your brothers will accept them gracefully and then leave us alone. Understood. Yes, David said quickly. Thank you, Jenna. Regardless of the results, thank you for even considering this. The testing took 2 hours blood work and tissue typing and medical history. We sat in uncomfortable waiting room chairs while technicians processed samples, neither of us talking much, both lost in our own thoughts about the strange turn this battle had taken. A doctor appeared after what felt like an eternity. Mitchell, we have preliminary results. You're not a compatible match. Your tissue markers are too different from the patient's for safe donation. I'm sorry. Relief and disappointment washed through me simultaneously. Jenna was safe from having to make the final difficult choice, but someone was still dying and we couldn't help even if we wanted to. The universe had made the decision for us, removed the burden of choice while adding the burden of helplessness. David's face when we told him was devastated. So that's it then. There's nothing more we can do except wait for a donor who probably won't come in time. There might be someone else, I said, the pieces clicking together in my mind with sudden clarity. Marcus. He shares your father's DNA through Thomas. He might be compatible where Jenna isn't. Marcus, David repeated blankly. The bastard son you threw in our faces during the court case. The nephew Joshua acknowledged and provided for, I corrected coldly. The family member you tried to pay off to hide his existence. Yes, that Marcus. Though why he'd help you after how you've treated him and his family, I have no idea. Call him Jenna, said pulling out her phone. At least give him the choice. Let him decide for himself whether mercy or justice matters more. Marcus and Sarah arrived within an hour, having been waiting nearby in case we needed support. When I explained the situation, Marcus's expression went through a dozen emotions in rapid succession. Shock, confusion, anger, and finally something that looked like painful recognition. My dad never knew his father cared about him, Marcus said slowly. Never got that acknowledgement or connection. If I can save his father's life, if I can give that man more time with his other sons, even though he denied my father that time, does that make me better than he was? Or does it just make me a fool? It makes you someone choosing mercy when you have every right to choose justice, I replied. Just like your Uncle Joshua did his whole life. He could have destroyed his brothers years ago, but he chose to rise above their cruelty instead. Maybe that's the real Mitchell legacy, not the greed and betrayal, but the choice to be better than the family that raised you. I'll get tested, Marcus decided. Not for him, not for the man who pretended my father didn't exist, but for my dad who died wondering if he ever mattered to anyone in his blood family. If I can save his father's life, maybe that proves my father mattered, after all that his son was worthy, even if he wasn't. The testing showed Marcus was a strong match, compatible in ways that made the transplant highly likely to succeed. David broke down crying when we told him overcome by the mercy being shown to people who'd earned nothing but contempt. Why are you doing this? He asked Marcus. After everything we said to you and your mother, after how we treated you, why would you help save our father? Because someone has to break the cycle, Marcus replied. Someone has to decide that blood doesn't have to mean cruelty, that family can be about love instead of competition. My Uncle Joshua tried to teach his brothers that lesson and failed. Maybe I can succeed where he couldn't. The surgery was scheduled for the following week, giving Marcus time to prepare physically and emotionally for the donation. Jenna stayed close to him during that week, the two of them bonding over their shared connection to Joshua and their determination to honor his memory by being better than the family that had tried to destroy them. Robert showed up the day before surgery looking diminished and old in a way his previous arrogance had hidden. He found me in the hospital cafeteria where I was getting coffee, approaching hesitantly, like he expected me to throw him out. "Catherine, I need to say something. I need you to hear it, even if you don't believe it or care. We were wrong about everything. About Joshua, about you, about what family means and what matters. My father's dying because of a genetic condition we all inherited, a condition Joshua died from while building something beautiful for people he loved. And now the son of a brother we denied is saving my father's life. The irony isn't lost on me. I don't need your apology, Robert," I told him. "I don't need your acknowledgement or your recognition of how wrong you were. What I need is for you and Alan and David to disappear from our lives completely once this is over, to let Jenna and Marcus and Sarah and me build the family Joshua wanted us to have without your interference. We will," he promised. "After this, after my father recovers, or doesn't, we'll leave you alone. We'll sign whatever documents you want, make whatever acknowledgments you require. We've lost Catherine. Completely and utterly lost. Joshua beat us even dying, and his nephew is saving our father's life while we were trying to destroy his legacy. We get it. We finally get it." The surgery went perfectly, Marcus's donated liver section taking in Robert's father with no complications. Jenna and I waited with Sarah during the procedure, drinking terrible hospital coffee and watching daytime television without really seeing it. When the surgeon emerged to tell us both patients were stable and recovering, the relief was overwhelming. We visited Marcus in recovery, finding him groggy but smiling. "Did it work?" he asked. "Is he going to live?" "Yes," Jenna told him, squeezing his hand. "You saved his life, Marcus. You gave him years he wouldn't have had otherwise." "Good," Marcus said, his eyes drifting closed. "Good. My dad mattered. I proved my dad mattered." As we left the hospital that evening, walking out into cool autumn air that smelled of rain and falling leaves, Jenna turned to me with tears in her eyes. "Dad would be proud of us, wouldn't he? We didn't let the Mitchell brothers' cruelty make us cruel. We chose mercy when we could have chosen justice. That's what he wanted, right? He wanted you to be yourself," I corrected gently, "whatever that self chose to be. But yes, sweetheart, I think he'd be incredibly proud of both of us. We've honored his legacy not by destroying his brothers, but by being better than they were. That's the real victory, not the legal battle or the property rights, but becoming the people he always believed we could be." We drove back to Maple Creek Farm in comfortable silence, both exhausted from the emotional weight of the past weeks. The house welcomed us with warm lights glowing in windows, the stables quiet with sleeping horses, the land stretching in all directions, filled with possibility and promise. This was home now, truly home, not just a property Joshua had left us, but a sanctuary we'd fought for and earned and claimed as our own. I went to the art studio and looked at the painting I'd been working on all week. It was starting to take shape, starting to become something more than just studies and sketches. A portrait of Joshua emerging from the canvas, not idealized or perfect, but real and human and complicated. The man who'd kept secrets and manipulated situations and loved us enough to prepare for every contingency. The man who'd been both wonderful and flawed, who'd given us everything while taking away his final months through deception. I picked up my brush and kept painting, bringing my husband back to life one brushstroke at a time. Not the man I'd thought I married, but the man I was finally beginning to understand. The portrait of Joshua took 3 weeks to complete, 3 weeks of obsessive work where I barely slept or ate, driven by the need to capture not just his features, but the essence of who he'd been. The complexity of loving someone who'd hidden so much while giving so much. Every brushstroke felt like excavation, digging through layers of memory and emotion to find truth underneath. Jenna would bring me food and force me to take breaks, worried I was losing myself in the painting the way Joshua had apparently predicted I would. "You need to rest, Mom. Dad wouldn't want you to destroy yourself creating art." "Your father spent 3 years building all this while dying," I replied, not looking away from the canvas. 3 years of secret work and careful planning. I can manage 3 weeks of painting. "That's different and you know it," she argued, but there was affection in her voice rather than real concern. "You're processing. Dad gave you permission to be obsessive about your art again, and you're making up for 20 lost years all at once." She wasn't wrong. The painting had become more than just a portrait of Joshua. It was a conversation with him, an argument with him, a love letter, and an accusation all at once. I painted him as I remembered him from our early years, young and hopeful, and unmarked by the secrets he'd later carry. Then I added layers of shadow and complexity, showing the man who'd hidden terminal diagnosis and property purchases and entire branches of family tree. The final image was haunting, beautiful, and disturbing in equal measure, a man caught between the person he wanted to be and the person his past had made him. When it was finally finished, when I could add no more without destroying what I'd created, I called Jenna and Ellis and Marcus and Sarah to the studio. They stood before the canvas in silence, each processing what they saw. "It's him," Jenna said finally, her voice thick with tears. "That's exactly him, Mom. Not the perfect father I wanted to remember, but the real complicated person who loved us enough to lie to us." "It's magnificent," Sarah added. "I never knew Joshua only knew Thomas's stories about the brother he never met, but this painting tells me more about him than any story could. He was trying so hard to protect everyone while protecting himself from being known." "Your husband would be honored," Ellis said quietly, "and probably a little uncomfortable with being seen this clearly. He spent a lifetime deflecting attention from his inner life." That evening, I sat alone in the studio after everyone had left, staring at Joshua's painted face, and realized I was angry. Furiously, devastatingly angry in a way I'd been avoiding since his death. He'd had no right to make these choices, for me to hide his diagnosis and steal my chance to say goodbye properly, to manipulate situations from beyond the grave, like we were all chess pieces in a game. Only he understood. "Why couldn't you just tell me I asked the painting? Why couldn't you trust me to handle the truth while you were still alive?" The painting offered no answers, just Joshua's complicated gaze staring back at me with all his secrets and careful planning. I picked up a brush and almost added something to the canvas, some mark of my anger, but stopped myself. The painting was finished. My anger would have to find expression some other way. My phone rang, an unknown number that I almost didn't answer. Then I recognized the Calgary area code and picked up warily. "Mrs. Mitchell, this is Dr. Reynolds from Calgary General. I was your husband's cardiologist during his final year. I apologize for calling so late, but I'm reaching out regarding something Joshua asked me to do after his death." "What do you mean?" I asked, new tension creeping up my spine. What else had Joshua arranged that I didn't know about? "He left a letter with me," Dr. Reynolds continued. "Instructions to contact you exactly 6 months after his passing. Said you'd need time to process everything else first, but that after 6 months you'd be ready to hear what he wanted me to tell you. May I come to the farm tomorrow? This conversation should happen in person." I agreed. Curiosity overcoming exhaustion. Joshua's revelations apparently had no end, just layers that kept unfolding the longer I lived in his absence. Dr. Reynolds arrived the next morning, a kind-faced man in his 50s, carrying a leather medical bag and an envelope bearing my name in Joshua's handwriting. We sat in the library, and he handed me the envelope with gentle sympathy. "I treated your husband from his diagnosis 3 years ago, until 2 weeks before his death," Dr. Reynolds began. "He was one of the most remarkable patients I've ever had, facing terminal illness with such grace and purpose. Most people in his position become consumed by fear or anger. Joshua became focused on building something for the people he loved. He was always purposeful." I agreed, opening the envelope with hands that shook slightly. Even dying, apparently, he had more lessons to teach me. The letter inside was shorter than I expected, just 1 page in Joshua's precise script. "My dearest Catherine, if you're reading this, then 6 months have passed since my death. 6 months of videos and revelations and battles with my brothers, and hopefully some healing. 6 months of you discovering who you are when you're not defined by being my wife. I asked Dr. Reynolds to wait this long because I needed you to be strong enough to hear what comes next. I lied to you, Kat. Not about loving you, that was always true, but about how much time I had. Dr. Reynolds gave me 2 to 5 years when I was first diagnosed. I told myself that was enough time to build the farm, create your sanctuary, prepare for every contingency. But 8 months ago, my condition worsened dramatically. Dr. Reynolds told me I had maybe 6 months left, probably less. I knew then I was running out of time. My vision blurred with tears as I continued reading. I could have told you then. Should have told you. But I was terrified that if you knew how little time remained, you'd make me stop. You'd insist I stay home, rest, focus on time together rather than finishing the farm. And I couldn't stop Kat. I was so close to completing everything, to making sure you'd be safe and provided for and free. So I hid how sick I was, kept traveling to Canada, kept pushing my failing body to finish what I'd started. The last 3 months especially, I was in constant pain. Pain I hid from you with medications and sheer determination. I knew it was killing me faster, knew I was choosing the farm over potential extra time with you. But I believed then and believe now that it was the right choice. Better to give you a completed sanctuary and slightly less time than an unfinished project and a few more months of watching me decline. I hope you can forgive me for this final deception. I hope you understand I did it from love, not selfishness. And I hope that the anger you must be feeling, the rage at my presumption that I knew better than you what mattered, will eventually transform into understanding that I gave you the greatest gift I could. Freedom from watching me die slowly, and freedom to become fully yourself in my absence. The letter ended with his usual sign-off. Until tomorrow, my love, which felt like a cruel joke. Now that I knew there were no more tomorrows, no more videos in the queue, no more revelations waiting. I let the letter fall to my lap and looked at Dr. Reynolds through tears. He chose finishing the farm over time with me. He killed himself faster to complete a property. He made that choice very consciously, Dr. Reynolds confirmed. I argued against it, told him repeatedly that he was sacrificing months or possibly a year of life. He said the months wouldn't matter if you didn't have the farm to anchor you, to give you purpose after he was gone. He said he'd rather die knowing you were provided for than live longer knowing he'd failed to complete what he started. That wasn't his choice to make, I said, anger finally breaking through the grief. He didn't get to decide that the farm mattered more than time together. He didn't get to choose his legacy over my goodbye. No, Dr. Reynolds agreed. He didn't. And I told him that. But terminal illness does strange things to people's thinking, Mrs. Mitchell. Joshua became obsessed with control, with ensuring outcomes he wouldn't be alive to see. It was his way of fighting the ultimate loss of control that death represents. After Dr. Reynolds left, I sat in the library for hours holding Joshua's final letter and letting myself feel the full scope of my fury. He'd stolen time from us, sacrificed potential months together for wood and stone and carefully planned futures. He'd loved me enough to build a sanctuary, but not enough to give me the choice of how we'd spend his final days. The arrogance of it, the presumption that he knew better what I needed, it made me want to scream. So I did. Went out to the empty pasture and screamed until my throat was raw, until the horses in the stable grew restless and Ellis came running to make sure I wasn't injured. "I'm fine," I told him, my voice wrecked. "I'm just incredibly angry at my dead husband, and there's nothing I can do with this anger because he's not here to fight with." "Sounds like you need to create something with it," Ellis suggested. "Your husband gave you a studio full of supplies for exactly this purpose. Channel it into art instead of letting it poison you from the inside." I spent the next week painting furiously, creating canvases that were raw and jagged and full of rage, abstract pieces that looked like emotional hemorrhaging, all sharp edges and violent colors and chaos barely contained. It was cathartic and painful and exactly what I needed, this purging of anger through creation. Jenna came to visit and found me surrounded by these new paintings, my studio transformed from peaceful sanctuary to battlefield of emotion. "Jesus, Mom," she breathed, walking from canvas to canvas. "These are intense. Your father stole time from us," I told her flatly. "He chose the farm over months we could have had together. I just learned this, and I'm trying not to burn the whole place down in response." She absorbed this information in silence, processing her own reaction. "Do you wish he hadn't built it? The farm? The art studio? All of it? Do you wish he'd stayed home and let you have those extra months instead?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Some days I think yes, absolutely. I'd trade all this for one more conversation where he wasn't dying in secret. Other days, I look at what he built and understand why he made that choice. He was trying to give me a life worth living after he was gone, not just memories of watching him die. That's really fucked up," Jenna said, and I almost laughed at hearing my daughter curse so matter-of-factly, like emotionally manipulative on a massive scale, but also kind of beautiful. I don't know how to feel about it either. Join the club, I replied. I'm furious and grateful and heartbroken all at once. He gave me everything I needed to thrive after his death, but he took away my right to choose how we'd spend his final months. Both things are true, and I have to find a way to live with both. Marcus called later that week, his voice shaky with emotion. Catherine, something's happened. Robert's father wants to meet me. Actually meet me, acknowledge me as his grandson. David says his surgery and recovery gave him time to think about his life, about the family he denied and the mistakes he made. He wants to try to make amends before it's too late. Do you want to meet him? I asked carefully. You don't owe him anything, Marcus. He denied your father's existence for decades. The fact that he's had a deathbed conversion doesn't erase that history. I know, Marcus said, but I keep thinking about what Uncle Joshua would do. He spent his life being better than his family, choosing mercy, when he had every right to choose justice. Maybe I should at least hear what Robert's father has to say. Then hear him, I suggested. But protect yourself. Go with your mom. Keep it short and remember you don't owe him forgiveness just because he finally decided to acknowledge you. The meeting happened 3 days later at a neutral location, a park halfway between Calgary and the farm. Marcus asked if Jenna and I would come for moral support, and we agreed staying at a distance but present if he needed backup. Robert's father looked diminished in his wheelchair, the surgery and recovery aging him dramatically, but his eyes were clear when he looked at Marcus, taking in the grandson he'd never acknowledged until facing his own mortality. You look like Thomas, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Same eyes, same way of holding yourself. I see my son in you, and it's like being given a second chance I don't deserve. You don't deserve it, Marcus agreed flatly. My father died never knowing if he mattered to you, never getting the acknowledgement or connection he spent his whole life wanting. You denied him basic human recognition because his existence was inconvenient to the life you'd built on lies. I know Robert's father said not making excuses or deflecting. I know what I did, what I took from Thomas and from you. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Marcus. I'm just asking if you'll let me know you now in whatever time I have left. Let me be your grandfather, in fact, not just biology. Why now? Marcus demanded. Why does dying suddenly make us matter when we didn't matter before? Because dying makes everything matter, the old man replied. Because I can't undo the past, but I can choose what I do with whatever future remains. Because my son Joshua, the one I did acknowledge, built a whole life around being better than me, and his nephew just saved my life when he had every reason to let me die. That kind of mercy deserves acknowledgement, deserves something better than the cruelty I showed your father. Marcus looked back at Sarah, seeking guidance. She nodded slightly, giving him permission to make whatever choice felt right. He turned back to Robert's father with visible conflict warring in his expression. I'll let you try, Marcus said finally. Not for you, but for my dad. He died wanting this connection, wanting to matter to his biological family. I'll let you know me for his sake so he matters retroactively, even if he never got this while he was alive. But I won't pretend your deathbed conversion erases decades of denial. You don't get to be the good guy in this story just because you're finally doing the bare minimum. Fair enough, Robert's father accepted. That's more than I deserve, and I won't waste the gift you're giving me. We walked back to the parking lot afterward, Marcus visibly drained from the emotional confrontation. That was harder than the surgery, he told Jenna. At least with the surgery, I was unconscious for the difficult part. You were incredible in there, Jenna said firmly. Standing up for your dad while still leaving room for connection. Uncle Joshua would be proud. I hope so, Marcus replied. I keep wondering what he'd think about all this, about me saving his father's life and now giving him a relationship with his grandson. Does it honor Uncle Joshua's memory or betray it by showing mercy to people who didn't show mercy to him? It honors it, I told him with certainty. Joshua spent his whole life refusing to let his family's cruelty make him cruel. You're following his example, choosing to be better than the people who hurt you. That's the real legacy he left Marcus, not the farm or the money or the legal victories, but the example of rising above. The oil extraction began in earnest that month. Western Plains Energy moving equipment onto the western section of the property with the careful attention to environmental protection I'd insisted on. The negotiations had resulted in a groundbreaking contract that other landowners were starting to use as a template, proving that profit and sustainability didn't have to be mutually exclusive. Thomas Reeves came to inspect the operation personally, walking the property with me and Ellis, examining the reclamation plans and environmental safeguards with satisfaction. "You've changed the industry, Catherine," he told me, as we stood overlooking the western hills where Joshua had found the hidden oil deposits. "Other companies are scrambling to match the standards you demanded because landowners are seeing they don't have to accept less. Your husband would be amazed by what you've built on his foundation. I haven't built anything I protested. I'm just following the plans Joshua left, maintaining what he created." "No," Reeves corrected firmly. "You're building on what he created, expanding his vision into areas he never anticipated. The environmental standards, the relationship with Marcus and his family, the art you're creating, that's all you, Catherine. Joshua gave you the tools and the permission. You're the one actually doing the work." That evening, I opened the laptop and scrolled to where I'd left off in Joshua's videos 6 months into the sequence. There were still 6 months of messages waiting, half a year of guidance and conversation and connection to a dead man who kept revealing new layers of complexity. The next video showed Joshua looking notably worse than in previous recordings, the progression of his illness undeniable. "Hello, my love. If you're watching this on schedule, then 6 months have passed since my death. 6 months of you discovering secrets and fighting battles and hopefully finding yourself in the process." He shifted in his chair, wincing slightly. "By now you've probably met with Dr. Reynolds and learned about my final deception. About how I chose finishing the farm over potential extra months with you. I know you're angry, Kat. I knew you would be when you finally learned the truth. So I want to use this video to explain something I couldn't write in the letter." I leaned closer to the screen, hungry for whatever rationalization he'd prepared for his choice. "I was terrified of you seeing me die," Joshua said, his voice raw with emotion. "Terrified of you watching me get weaker and sicker of seeing the man you loved reduced to someone who couldn't walk across a room without gasping for breath. My father died that way, slowly and painfully, and I watched my brothers' faces as he declined. They looked at him with pity and disgust and relief when he finally went. I couldn't bear the thought of you looking at me that way. So I pushed myself harder than I should have, worked through pain that should have sent me to the hospital, and yes, I shortened my life by months in order to finish the farm. But those months would have been agony for both of us, Kat. You would have been watching someone you loved disintegrate, and I would have been watching you watch me. I chose to spare us both that particular hell, even if it meant less time together." He looked directly into the camera with desperate intensity. "I know it was selfish. I know I stole your chance to say goodbye properly, to have those final conversations people are supposed to have. But I gave you something else instead. I gave you memories of me healthy and whole. A husband who went to work one day and didn't come home, rather than a husband who slowly stopped being himself. And I gave you this farm, this sanctuary, this permission to be fully yourself in ways you never were while I was alive." The video showed him pulling out a handkerchief to wipe his eyes. "If you can't forgive me for this choice, I understand. If you're angry enough to sell the farm and walk away from everything I built, that's your right. But I hope you'll understand that I did it from love, Kat. Misguided, presumptuous, arrogant love, but love nonetheless. I couldn't stop being a protector, even when protection meant stealing your choices. That was my greatest flaw and my deepest truth." The video ended, and I sat crying, anger and understanding, mixing into something too complex to name. Joshua had been right about one thing. Watching him die slowly would have been torture, but he'd been wrong about something more important. I should have had the choice of which torture to endure, which memories to carry. He'd decided for me, and that presumption, however well-intentioned, was the final way he'd made himself more important than us. "I'm still angry," I told the blank screen. "Your explanation doesn't absolve you, doesn't make the choice right. But I'm starting to understand why you made it, even if I'll never agree with it." The next morning I woke to Ellis knocking urgently on my door. "Mrs. "Mitchell, you need to come to the stable immediately. Something's wrong with Midnight." I threw on clothes and ran, finding the big Frisian stallion down in his stall, breathing laboriously and clearly in distress. Ellis had already called the vet, but the fear in his eyes told me this was serious. "What happened?" I demanded, kneeling beside Midnight and stroking his sweat-soaked neck. "He was fine yesterday. Colic, probably," Ellis said grimly, "but severe. His stomach's twisted, and without surgery in the next few hours, he won't make it." The vet arrived 20 minutes later and confirmed Ellis's diagnosis. "We need to get him to the equine hospital in Calgary immediately. It's a 3-hour drive, and we'd need to transport him in a trailer designed for horses in his condition. Even then, the surgery is risky and expensive." How expensive, I asked, though money was no longer an issue thanks to Joshua's planning. $30,000 minimum, the vet replied. "Possibly more if there are complications. And even with surgery, there's no guarantee he'll survive." "Do it," I decided without hesitation. "Whatever it costs, whatever it takes." Joshua chose Midnight specifically because he reminded him of a painting I loved 20 years ago. I'm not letting him die without fighting. The transport and surgery became a marathon hours of waiting while veterinary surgeons worked to untwist Midnight's intestines and save his life. Jenna drove up from Calgary to sit with me in the waiting room, both of us exhausted and terrified in equal measure. "It's just a horse, Mom," she said gently when I broke down crying in the uncomfortable plastic chairs. "I mean, I know he's not just a horse to you, but even if the worst happens, you still have 5 other horses, you still have the farm." "He's not just a horse," I corrected fiercely. "He's Joshua's last gift to me. The one that proves he paid attention all those years ago when I stood in front of a painting and felt something I couldn't articulate. He remembered when I'd forgotten, brought that memory to life in a living animal. If Midnight dies, another piece of Joshua dies with him." The surgery took 6 hours. When the veterinary surgeon finally emerged looking exhausted but relieved, I nearly collapsed with gratitude. He made it. The surgery was successful, and he's stable in recovery. He'll need intensive care for the next 2 weeks, but with proper treatment, he should make a full recovery. I visited Midnight in his recovery stall, finding him groggy but alive, his dark eyes tracking my movement with recognition. "You scared me," I told him, stroking his nose gently. "Don't do that again. I've lost enough lately without losing you too." The next 2 weeks, I drove to Calgary daily to check on Midnight's recovery, to sit with him in his stall and talk to him about Joshua, about the farm, about the paintings I was creating. The veterinary staff probably thought I was crazy, this middle-aged woman, having one-sided conversations with a horse, but Midnight seemed to respond to my voice, growing calmer and more alert when I was there. "He's bonded to you," the head veterinarian observed during one visit. "That's actually helping his recovery. Animals heal faster when they have something to connect to, someone they trust." Joshua knew that, I replied. He knew I'd need Midnight, need that connection to him and to my own past. Everything Joshua built was about connection, about creating relationships that would sustain me after he was gone. Midnight came home to Maple Creek Farm on a brilliant autumn day when the maple trees were at peak color, living up to the farm's name with their gold and red and orange glory. Ellis had his stall prepared with fresh hay and extra padding, treating the horse like royalty returning from war. "Welcome home," I told Midnight as he settled into familiar surroundings. "You gave me a scare, but you're okay now. We're both okay now." That evening, I returned to the studio and started a new painting inspired by Midnight's near-death and recovery. The image that emerged was of a black horse rising from water or darkness, powerful and resilient, choosing life over surrender. It was metaphorical in ways that probably weren't subtle, but I didn't care. Subtlety had never been my strength. The year anniversary of Joshua's death approached with surprising speed, months that had felt eternal while living them now seeming compressed in retrospect. I'd come so far from the confused, angry widow who'd arrived at Maple Creek Farm 12 months earlier. I'd fought battles and made art and built family from unexpected connections. I'd honored Joshua's memory while also being furious with him, holding both emotions simultaneously without letting either diminish the other. The final video in Joshua's sequence was marked simply 1 year. I'd been dreading and anticipating this moment for months, knowing it would be our last conversation, the end of his ability to guide me from beyond the grave. "Hello, Kat?" He began, looking directly into the camera, with an expression of love so pure it made my breath catch. "If you're watching this, then a full year has passed since my death. 365 days of you navigating life without me discovering who Catherine Mitchell is when she's not defined primarily by being my wife. I hope you've painted. I hope you've ridden the horses. I hope you've become the woman I always saw beneath the layers of responsibility and caution." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "This is the last video, the last message I can leave you. After this, you're completely on your own, no more guidance from beyond the grave, no more of me interfering in your life. So I want to say some things I couldn't say in earlier videos because you weren't ready to hear them yet." I gripped the laptop tighter, needing to hold something solid, while Joshua's final words washed over me. "First, I'm sorry. Not for building the farm, or hiding my diagnosis, or any of the practical choices I made. Those were right, even if they were also wrong. I'm sorry for presuming to know better than you what you needed. I'm sorry for making myself the author of your future, instead of trusting you to write it yourself. I spent our marriage being your protector and provider, and even dying, I couldn't stop playing that role. You deserved a partner who saw you as an equal, not someone who needed protection. Second, I need you to know that every secret I kept, every manipulation I orchestrated, it was all because I was terrified of losing control. Cancer patients talk about this the way terminal illness strips away your agency until dying is the only thing you're doing. I fought that by controlling what I could, planning for outcomes I wouldn't see, arranging futures I'd never be part of. It was compulsive and arrogant and deeply unfair to you. But it was also how I survived those last 3 years with any sense of purpose. Third and most important, I need you to let me go. Really, let me go, Kat. Stop watching these videos on repeat. Stop consulting my ghost when you make decisions. Stop living in the shadow of what I built, and start building your own future, one I can't control or plan for or manipulate. The farm is yours, the art is yours, the life ahead is yours. Don't let me haunt you any longer." The video showed Joshua leaning back, clearly exhausted by the emotion of his final message. "I love you, Catherine. I've loved you since we were 23 and will love you beyond death if such things are possible. But you need to live for you now, not for me. Paint what you want to paint. Love who you want to love. Build the future that makes sense for the person you've become. And if that future looks nothing like what I planned, if you sell the farm tomorrow and move to Paris to paint full-time, that's perfect. That means you've finally stopped letting me control your life." He smiled that crooked smile one last time. "Until tomorrow, my love. Except there is no tomorrow for us anymore. Just your tomorrows, whatever you choose to make them. I believe in you, Kat. I always have. Now it's time for you to believe in yourself." The screen went dark, and I sat in the silent studio, feeling the weight of Joshua's final gift settling over me. Permission to let him go. Permission to move forward without his guidance. Permission to become someone he'd never known, someone even I didn't fully know yet. I closed the laptop for the last time and stood walking to the window that overlooked the eastern pastures where 6 horses grazed in fading autumn light. Tomorrow was Jenna's birthday, and I'd promised to make her favorite dinner, a tradition we'd maintained through Joshua's death and the chaos of the past year. Marcus and Sarah were coming too, this family we'd built from wreckage and mercy. The farm would continue its rhythms. The oil would be extracted carefully and the land reclaimed. My paintings would fill galleries and maybe mean something to people beyond myself. Jenna would build her own life informed by her father's love, but not limited by it. And I would keep discovering who Catherine Mitchell was when she wasn't anyone's wife or mother or teacher, just herself, complete and complicated and free. I picked up my brush and turned to a fresh canvas, ready to begin again, without Joshua's guidance, without his vision, without anything except what I chose to create. The forbidden farm had become the foundation of my new life, but what I built on that foundation was entirely up to me. And for the first time since Joshua's death, that possibility felt not terrifying, but liberating the future, stretching ahead full of choices. Only I could make mistakes. Only I could claim triumphs. Only I could earn. I dipped my brush in paint and began to work, creating something Joshua had never imagined, something only I could envision, something entirely mine.